The morning sun of Kepler-4 for to be cast long shadows across the Galactic Defense Academy campus. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of different worlds walk through the main corridors, their varied forms creating a colorful display of galactic diversity. Some floated, some crawled, and others moved in ways that defied easy description. The third-year military strategy class was about to begin. This was the most important semester for cadets who dreamed of becoming officers in the Galactic Defense Force. The classroom buzzed with nervous energy as students took their seats. The room itself was designed to accommodate all species, with adjustable gravity fields, atmosphere controls, and seating that could adapt to any body type. Commander Vex entered the room with heavy footsteps that echoed across the metal floor. He was a member of the Drakkar species, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales that reflected the classroom lights. His yellow eyes scanned the room, taking note of each student. As the head of military strategy, he had trained thousands of cadets over the years, and his reputation for being tough but fair was known throughout the academy. "Good morning, cadets," Commander Vex said in his deep voice. "Today marks the beginning of your most challenging assignment this semester." The room fell silent. Every student knew that this assignment would determine their future in the Galactic Defense Force. Those who failed would have to repeat the entire year, while those who succeeded would move on to advanced training. "You'll be studying the military history of different civilizations across the galaxy," the commander continued. "Each team will focus on one species and their methods of warfare. You must understand not just what they did, but why they did it, and how it shaped their culture." Jake Miller sat in the middle of the room, his human form looking small compared to many of his classmates. He had been at the academy for 2 years now, and while he had made friends, he sometimes felt like an outsider. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society, having joined only 50 years ago. "Your teams have already been assigned," Commander Vex announced, activating a holographic display that showed the team listings. "You will have 4 weeks to complete your research and prepare a presentation for the entire academy." Jake looked at the display and found his name under Team 7. His teammates were listed below: Kira from the Mare Colonies, Bolt from the Hive Worlds, Rex from the Shard Federation, and Nova from the Nebula Collective. He smiled slightly. These were his closest friends at the academy, and he was glad to be working with them. Kira was from an aquatic species that lived in the deep oceans of their water-covered homeworld. She wore a special breathing apparatus that allowed her to survive in the Academy's standard atmosphere. Her skin had a blue-green tint, and her large eyes could see in almost complete darkness. Despite her alien appearance, she had a gentle personality and was known for her strategic thinking. Bolt came from a species that resembled large insects, with a hard outer shell and multiple arms. His people lived in massive underground cities where millions worked together like a single organism. He was incredibly fast at processing information and could calculate complex battle scenarios in seconds. Rex belonged to the Shard Federation, a species made of living crystal. His body was translucent, and lights moved through him like thoughts, made visible. His people were known for their logical thinking and their ability to analyze problems from multiple angles. They rarely made mistakes, but they also took a long time to make decisions. Nova was perhaps the most unusual member of their team. The Nebula Collective were beings made of organized gas and energy. Nova appeared as a shimmering cloud that constantly changed shape and color. Their species communicated through electromagnetic pulses and could exist in the vacuum of space. They were excellent at understanding large-scale movements and patterns. Team 7 Commander Vex called out, reading from his datapad. "Your assignment is Terran military history, focusing on the 20th and 21st centuries of Earth." Jake felt his stomach drop. His teammates turned to look at him with curious expressions. They had heard stories about human warfare, but none of them had ever studied it in detail. Most galactic species had conflicts, but nothing like what humans had experienced on Earth. "Each team must present their findings to the entire academy," the commander continued. "This presentation will count for 40% of your final grade. You will have access to the restricted military archives, where classified footage and documents from across the galaxy are stored." The weight of the assignment began to sink in. Jake knew what his teammates were about to discover about human history, the wars, the violence, the destruction that humans had brought upon themselves for thousands of years. He wondered how his friends would react when they saw the footage of human conflicts. After the class ended, the 5 teammates gathered in the hallway outside the classroom. The other students were already discussing their assignments with excitement. But Team 7 stood in relative quiet. "So Jake," Kira said, her voice coming through her breathing apparatus with a slight electronic distortion, "what can you tell us about human warfare?" Jake looked at his friends, trying to find the right words. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Humans have been fighting wars for most of our recorded history. We've had conflicts on a scale that most species never experience." Bolt's compound eyes focused on Jake. "My people sometimes have disagreements between different hives, but they usually last only a few days." "How long do human wars typically last?" "Some have lasted decades," Jake answered honestly. "The longest conflicts in human history went on for over 100 years. Rex's crystalline form dimmed slightly, which was his species' equivalent of showing concern. "It seems excessive. How does a species survive such prolonged conflict?" "We adapt," Jake said simply. "Humans are very good at adapting to difficult situations." Nova's gaseous form swirled as they processed this information. "The Nebula Collective has experienced conflicts, but we usually resolve them through negotiation. Physical violence is rare among our people." "When do we start our research?" Kira asked, changing the subject. "Tomorrow morning," Jake replied. "We have access to the restricted archive starting at 0800 hours. As they walked toward the dormitory section of the academy, Jake couldn't help but feel nervous about what his friends would discover. Human military history was full of moments of both great heroism and terrible destruction. He wondered if they would understand the context behind the conflicts, or if they would only see the violence. The academy's main corridor was busy with students from all over the galaxy. Jake watched as a group of tall, thin beings from the spiral arm worlds glided past, followed by a cluster of small, furry creatures from the Outer Rim territories. The diversity of life in the galaxy never ceased to amaze him, Jake Rex said, interrupting his thoughts. "Are you concerned about this assignment?" Jake considered the question carefully. "Yes," he admitted. "Human history isn't always easy to understand. Some of the things we've done might seem shocking to other species." "We've been friends for 2 years," Bolt said. "Whatever we discover about human history won't change that." Jake smiled at his teammates' words, but he still felt a knot of worry in his stomach. Tomorrow, his friends would begin to see the true nature of human warfare, and he wasn't sure how they would react to what they found. The restricted archives were located deep beneath the academy in a section that most students never saw. Team 7 stood before a massive metal door marked with warning signs in dozens of languages. Jake pressed his hand against the scanner, and after a moment, the door opened with a low hum. The archive room was enormous, filled with holographic displays and data storage units that reached up to the high ceiling. The air was cool and dry, designed to preserve the countless records stored within. Floating screens showed military footage from wars across the galaxy, each one carefully cataloged and secured. "This place is incredible," Kira whispered, her breathing apparatus making soft clicking sounds as she looked around. "I had no idea. The academy kept so much information here." Service robot approached them, its metal body reflecting the blue lights of the archive displays. "Team 7, you have been granted access to the Terran military database. Please follow me to your assigned research station." The robot led them to a corner of the archive, where 5 chairs surrounded a large holographic projector. The equipment was more advanced than anything they had used in regular classes. Jake sat down first, placing his hand on the control panel to activate the system. "Terran military database activated," the computer announced in a calm voice. "Warning, this database contains graphic content depicting warfare and violence. Viewer discretion is advised." Jake's teammates exchanged glances. They had all seen violence before, but the computer's warning made them realize they might be unprepared for what they were about to witness. "Let's start with something basic," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. Computer, show us an overview of human warfare in the 20th century. The holographic display activated, showing a map of Earth with red dots marking conflict zones. There were dozens of them scattered across every continent. The sight made Bolt's antennae twitch. Nervously. So many conflicts, Rex observed, his crystalline form glowing brighter as he processed the information. Why were humans fighting in so many places at once? Different reasons, Jake explained. Resources, territory, ideas about how society should work. Sometimes old conflicts would start new ones. Computer, show us footage from World War II, Jake commanded. Knowing this would be a significant moment for his teammates, the display changed, showing black and white footage of human soldiers landing on a beach under heavy gunfire. Explosions erupted around them as they ran across the sand, many falling before they could reach cover. The sound of gunfire and shouting filled the archive room. Kira's gill slits began fluttering rapidly, sign of distress among her people. "How many humans are dying in this footage?" she asked quietly. "Thousands," Jake replied. "This was just one battle. The war lasted 6 years and involved most of the world." The footage continued, showing bombers flying over cities, tanks rolling through destroyed streets, and soldiers fighting in conditions that seemed impossible to survive. Nova's gaseous form began to condense, pulling closer together as they watched. "The scale is unbelievable," Nova said, their voice coming through the translation device as electromagnetic pulses. "My people have never seen anything like this. How did human civilization survive such destruction?" "We rebuilt," Jake said simply. "After every war, humans rebuild and try to do better next time." Bolt was studying tactical displays that showed troop movements and battle strategies. "These human soldiers are making decisions very quickly," he observed. "In my hive, we would need time to discuss and reach consensus before taking action." "Humans don't always have time for discussion in combat," Jake explained. "Individual. Soldiers are trained to make their own decisions when communication is cut off." The computer continued showing footage from different battles. They watched humans fighting in frozen mountains, dense jungles, and burning deserts. In every environment, human soldiers found ways to adapt and continue fighting. Rex was particularly interested in the engineering aspects of human warfare. "Look at these vehicles and weapons," he said, pointing at the display. "Humans built all of this while fighting the war. My people would need decades to design and construct such machines." "Humans work faster when under pressure," Jake said. "War forces us to innovate quickly." As the hours passed, the footage moved to more recent conflicts. They watched videos from Vietnam where human soldiers fought in thick jungle terrain against an enemy they could rarely see. The conditions looked horrible, with mud, heat, and constant danger. "Why do they continue fighting in such conditions?" Kira asked. "Any rational being would retreat to better ground. Sometimes retreat isn't an option," Jake answered. "And sometimes humans fight for reasons that go beyond just winning or losing." The display showed medics running into gunfire to help wounded soldiers, and troops sharing their food with local civilians, despite having very little for themselves. These images seemed to confuse Jake's teammates even more. "They help there." "Enemies?" Bolt asked, watching footage of human soldiers treating wounded prisoners with medical care. "Humans have rules about how to treat people in war," Jake explained. "Even enemies deserve basic dignity." Nova's form swirled as they tried to process this information. "This makes no logical sense. If these beings are enemies, why waste resources?" "Helping them? Because it's the right thing to do," Jake said. "Humans believe that how you fight is just as important as why you fight." The footage moved to urban warfare, showing human soldiers clearing buildings room by room in cities filled with civilians. The complexity of the situations was staggering. Soldiers had to identify threats while protecting innocent people, often making life-or-death decisions in seconds. Rex's inner light dimmed as he watched. The number of variables in these combat situations is overwhelming. How do humans process so much information so quickly? "Experience and training," Jake replied, "but also instinct. Humans have good instincts for survival and adaptation." Watched footage of special operations where small teams of humans accomplished missions that seemed impossible. Soldiers operating alone behind enemy lines for weeks, surviving on minimal supplies while gathering intelligence or rescuing prisoners. This is not normal behavior for most species, Kira said, her voice barely audible. The level of individual capability and determination is beyond what we thought possible. As the day continued, Jake watched his teammates become more and more disturbed by what they were seeing. Their initial curiosity had turned to shock, then to a kind of horrified fascination. They were beginning to understand that humans were fundamentally different from other species in ways they had never imagined. How do human families deal with losing members to war? Nova asked after watching footage of a military funeral. With grief, but also with pride, Jake answered. Humans honor those who sacrifice themselves for others. By the end of their first session in the archives, Jake's teammates sat in stunned silence. They had seen only a small fraction of human military history, but it was already more violence and destruction than most species experienced in their entire civilizations. We need to process this information, Rex said finally. Suggest we continue tomorrow. As they left the archives, Jake noticed that none of his teammates were talking. They walked through the academy corridors in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had discovered about human nature. The second day in the archives began with an uncomfortable silence. Team 7 gathered at their research station, but none of Jake's teammates seemed eager to continue watching human war footage. The events of the previous day had clearly affected them deeply. Kira arrived first, moving more slowly than usual. Her normally bright blue-green skin looked pale, and her gill slits moved in short, quick patterns that indicated stress. She had barely eaten at dinner the night before, and Jake noticed she was carrying a nutrient supplement designed for her species. I had trouble sleeping last night, Kira admitted as she sat down. I kept thinking about those soldiers running across the beach. So many of them were barely adults. Bolt entered the archive room with his usual quick steps, but his normally bright carapace had changed to a dull brown color. Among his people, this was a sign of deep worry or fear. His compound eyes moved constantly, unable to focus on any one thing for long. My hivemates contacted me last night, Bolt said, settling into his chair. They wanted to know about our research. When I tried to explain what we had seen, they thought I was experiencing some kind of mental breakdown. Rex arrived next, his crystalline form dimmer than Jake had ever seen it. The lights that usually moved through his body like flowing thoughts were reduced to weak flickers. He moved carefully, as if each step required great effort. I've been calculating casualty numbers all night, Rex said in a voice that sounded tired. The mathematical reality of human warfare is beyond my understanding. The losses should have ended these conflicts within days, not years. Nova was the last to arrive, and their condition was perhaps the most concerning. The Nebula collective being had compressed their gaseous form into a tight, dark cloud that barely moved. Usually, Nova's form danced and swirled with energy, but now they appeared almost solid. My collective tried to process the information I shared with them, Nova said through their translation device. The concept of sustained individual combat over extended periods caused a system-wide confusion. Many of my people believe the data must be corrupted. Jake looked at his teammates with growing concern. He had expected them to be shocked by human warfare, but their reactions were more severe than he had anticipated. They were not just disturbed by the violence, but fundamentally confused by human behavior in ways that seemed to challenge their basic understanding of intelligent life. Should we continue? Jake asked gently. We could ask Commander Vex for a different assignment. No, Rex said firmly, his crystalline form brightening slightly. We are military cadets. We must understand all forms of warfare if we want to serve in the Galactic Defense Force. Jake activated the computer system, and the holographic display came to life once again. Today, we will look at more recent human conflicts, he said. Compute. Show us footage from the Gulf War. The display showed human military technology from the late 20th century. Precision-guided missiles struck targets with incredible accuracy, while human pilots flew missions in conditions that would be impossible for most species to survive. The speed and coordination of human forces impressed and disturbed Jake's teammates. They moved so fast, Bolt observed, watching footage of human tank formations advancing across desert terrain. My people require extensive coordination between hive units. How do humans maintain such rapid movement without losing cohesion? Individual initiative, Jake explained. Each human soldier is trained to act independently when necessary, but also to work as part of a team. The footage moved to urban combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jake watched his teammates' expressions grow more troubled as they witnessed the complexity of human warfare in populated areas. Human soldiers had to distinguish between civilians and combatants in split seconds, often while under fire. Kira was particularly disturbed by footage of human soldiers clearing buildings. They enter structures without knowing what they will find inside, she said, her voice shaking slightly. The risk of death or injury is enormous, yet they continue forward. It's their job, Jake said simply. Human soldiers accept these risks as part of their duty. The breaking point came when they accessed classified footage from special operations missions. The display showed small teams of human soldiers operating deep in enemy territory, often outnumbered by hundreds to one. They watched as these teams completed missions that seemed impossible, using tactics that defied conventional military logic. Nova's form began to fluctuate wildly as they tried to process what they were seeing. "This is not possible," they said, their electromagnetic voice crackling with confusion. No rational species would attempt such operations with such low probability of success. Yet they succeed, Rex pointed out, his analytical mind struggling with the data. These human soldiers complete their missions despite overwhelming odds. The mathematics of their success should not work. The footage showed human soldiers surviving in hostile environments for weeks or months, living off minimal supplies while gathering intelligence or conducting rescue operations. They adapted to any terrain, any climate, any situation that was presented to them. Bolt's antennae twitched erratically as he watched a rescue mission where human soldiers entered a building filled with enemies to save hostages. They risked multiple lives to save strangers, he said. This behavior makes no sense from a survival perspective. Humans value individual life, Jake tried to explain. Even the life of one person is worth significant risk to save. Kira had stopped looking at the display entirely. She sat with her head in her hands, her breathing apparatus making distressed sounds. "I cannot understand this," she whispered. "My people have conflicts over territory and resources, but humans fight wars over ideas, over concepts that have no physical form. They died for democracy, for freedom, for justice," she continued, referring to footage they had seen earlier. "These are not things you can touch or measure, yet humans will sacrifice everything for them." The team watched more footage of human endurance in combat. Soldiers fighting for days without sleep, continuing missions despite injuries that would incapacitate most species, and maintaining discipline and morale under conditions that should have broken their spirit. Rex's form had dimmed to almost complete darkness. "I have been trying to create a logical framework to understand human warfare," he said. "Every model I construct breaks down when faced with the reality of human behavior in combat. They do not follow the rules," Rex continued. "They adapt faster than should be possible. They take risks that should be fatal, and they achieve results that should be impossible. How does a species develop such capabilities?" By the third day, the psychological toll on Jake's teammates was clearly visible. They had lost weight, their sleep patterns were disrupted, and their natural behaviors were becoming erratic. The footage of human warfare was challenging their fundamental beliefs about intelligent life and rational behavior. Jake realized that his friends were not just learning about human military history. They were being forced to confront the reality that their understanding of warfare, strategy, and survival was incomplete. Humans represented something entirely outside their experience, and that realization was breaking down their confidence in everything they thought they knew. Jake watched his teammates suffer through another morning in the archives. For 3 days they had been studying human warfare, and each day had made them more confused and disturbed. He could see the stress wearing them down. Kira barely spoke. Anymore, Bolt's carapace remained that sickly brown color. Rex's light had almost gone out completely, and Nova stayed compressed in a tight, dark cloud. They sat around the holographic display in silence, staring at footage of human peacekeeping operations. Even these supposedly peaceful missions showed humans in dangerous situations, making difficult decisions under pressure. Jake realized that his friends were missing something important about human nature. "I need to quit the academy," Kira said, suddenly breaking the silence. Her voice was barely a whisper through her breathing apparatus. "I cannot continue studying this. Humans are too violent, too unpredictable. I am not meant to serve alongside such beings." Bolt's compound eyes focused on the display showing human medics working in a war zone. "Yesterday, I tried to explain human tactics to my hive mind. They believe I have been damaged by exposure to irrational behavior. They want me to return home for psychological treatment." Rex's crystalline form was so dim that Jake could barely see the internal structure. "I have run thousands of calculations trying to understand human warfare. Every model fails. Humans should have destroyed themselves long ago, yet they have. Conquered their planet and reached the stars. It makes no mathematical sense. Contradiction is breaking my mind," Rex continued. "How can a species be so destructive yet so successful? How can they fight wars for decades and still maintain a functioning civilization?" Nova's compressed form pulsed weakly. "My collective has declared human warfare to be a form of mass insanity. They believe exposure to such behavior could contaminate our thought patterns. I have been ordered to stop this research immediately." Jake looked at his four friends, seeing the genuine distress in their alien features. They had been trying to understand human warfare using the logic of their own species, and it simply did not work. He realized that he needed to help them see what they were missing. "You are all looking at this wrong," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made his teammates turn to focus on him. "You see the violence, the destruction, the death, but you are not seeing the whole picture." He reached for the computer controls, pulling up different footage than they had been watching. Instead of battle scenes, he showed them human soldiers, building schools in war zones, medics treating enemy wounded, and peacekeepers protecting civilians at great personal risk. "Watch this," Jake said, displaying footage of human soldiers during World War II, but instead of the beach landings they had seen before, he showed them liberating concentration camps, sharing food with starving prisoners, and treating survivors with gentleness and care. Kira looked up from her hands for the first time that morning. "They are helping people," she said with surprise. "Even after all that fighting, they stopped to help victims." "That is what you have been missing," Jake said. "Humans do not fight because we love violence. We fight because we love peace. We go to war to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He showed them more footage. Human soldiers in Somalia distributing food to hungry children, peacekeepers in Bosnia stopping ethnic cleansing, and troops in Afghanistan building wells and hospitals for local communities. "Every war teaches us something," Jake continued. "Every battle makes us better at protecting innocent people. The violence you see is not the goal. It is the price we pay to defend what we believe in." Bolt's antennae began to move in a more normal pattern as he processed this new perspective. "You fight wars to end wars?" he asked. "Sometimes," Jake replied. "We fight to stop greater violence. We accept casualties to prevent worse outcomes. When humans see injustice, we cannot ignore it." Rex's form began to brighten slightly as he reconsidered the data he had been analyzing. "So the apparent irrationality is actually a different form of logic," he said slowly. "Humans calculate not just immediate survival, but long-term consequences. For others?" Jake nodded. "Exactly. When human soldiers stormed those beaches in World War II, they knew many would die. But they also knew that if they did not act, millions more innocent people would suffer under tyranny." He showed them footage of the Berlin airlift, where human pilots flew dangerous missions to bring food to civilians in a blockaded city. These pilots risked their lives every day for months to feed people they had never met, Jake explained. Nova's form began to expand slightly, their natural curiosity overcoming their distress. "They chose to help former enemies," Nova observed. "After years of warfare, they provided aid to the same people they had been fighting." "Humans separate the people from their governments," Jake said. "We can fight a nation's army while still caring about its civilians. We understand that ordinary people are often victims of their leaders' decisions." Kira was studying footage of human disaster relief operations. "They respond to natural disasters in other countries," she noted, "even when those nations cannot offer anything in return. Because it is the right thing to do, Jake said simply. Humans believe that all intelligent life has value, regardless of species or nationality. He showed them more examples. Human soldiers adopting orphan children from war zones, military engineers building infrastructure in developing nations, medical personnel treating diseases in remote locations at great personal risk to themselves. The violence is real, Jake acknowledged. Humans are capable of terrible destruction, but we are also capable of tremendous sacrifice for others. The same qualities that make us dangerous in war make us valuable in peace. Bolt was examining tactical data with new understanding. Human unpredictability in combat comes from the same source as your adaptability in humanitarian missions. He realized, you improvise solutions because you refuse to accept defeat when lives are at stake. Yes, Jake confirmed. Humans do not give up easily. Whether we are fighting an enemy or fighting hunger, disease, or natural disasters, we keep trying until we find a way to succeed. Rex's analytical mind was reprocessing everything they had learned. The mathematical models failed because I was only calculating military variables, he said. I was not accounting for moral and ethical factors in human decision-making. Humans fight with our hearts as much as our minds, Jake explained. We make decisions based on what we believe is right, not just what is tactically smart. Nova's form was slowly returning to its normal flowing pattern. Your species has weaponized compassion, they said with what sounded like wonder. You turn your capacity for caring into a strategic advantage. Jake smiled at this observation. We fight hardest when we are protecting something we love. A human soldier defending his home and family is more dangerous than one fighting for conquest. As his teammates began to understand this new perspective, Jake could see the stress leaving their faces. They were no longer trying to force human behavior into their own logical frameworks. Instead, they were beginning to appreciate the unique way humans approached conflict and survival. This changes everything, Kira said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Humans are not irrational. You simply use a different kind of logic than other species. The Academy's grand amphitheater was filled beyond capacity. Word had spread throughout the campus about Team 7's research into human warfare, and cadets from every species had come to hear their findings. The curved walls of the amphitheater could accommodate thousands of beings, and today, every seat was taken. Jake stood backstage with his teammates, looking through a gap in the curtain at the massive audience. He had never seen so many different species gathered in one place. There were the tall, graceful beings from the Spiral Arm worlds, the small furry creatures from the Outer Rim, and dozens of others he could not immediately identify. I've never spoken to so many people before, Kira said nervously, adjusting her breathing apparatus. Her skin had returned to its normal blue-green color over the past week, and she moved with renewed confidence. Bolt's carapace had brightened back to its usual metallic sheen. My hive mind is watching through the Academy's broadcast system, he said. They are curious about our conclusions after rejecting my initial reports. Rex's crystalline form glowed with steady, bright light. The past week of rewriting their presentation had restored his confidence in his analytical abilities. I have completely reconstructed my mathematical models of human warfare, he said. The new calculations are far more accurate. Nova's gaseous form swirled with excited energy patterns. My collective has agreed to suspend judgment until they hear our full presentation, they said. They are particularly interested in our analysis of human adaptability. Commander Vex appeared beside them, his large reptilian form moving silently despite his size. Team 7, you are scheduled to present in 5 minutes, he said. I understand your research has generated significant interest among the faculty and student body. Yes, sir, Jake replied. We believe our findings will be valuable for the entire Academy. The commander's yellow eyes studied each team member. Carefully, I've heard rumors that your research nearly caused some team members to quit the Academy. Is this true? It was a difficult assignment, sir, Kira answered honestly. But we learned important lessons about human nature and warfare. Good, Commander Vex said, with what might have been approval. The best learning often comes from facing challenging material. You may begin when ready. The team walked onto the stage, and the amphitheater fell silent. Jake looked out at the sea of alien faces, all focused intently on their small group. In the front rows, he could see the Academy's teaching staff, including specialists in military strategy from across the galaxy. Rex stepped forward to begin their presentation. As the most analytical member of their team, he would provide the mathematical and strategic framework for their findings. Fellow cadets and honored faculty, Rex began, his voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater's sound system. Our study of human warfare initially appeared to show a species engaged in endless irrational violence. Our first calculations suggested that humans should have destroyed themselves long ago, activated the holographic display system, showing charts and graphs that demonstrated human conflict patterns over centuries. However, these initial models were incomplete because they failed to account for the unique motivations behind human warfare. Rex continued his analysis, explaining how human conflicts differed from those of other species. Where most civilizations fought for resources or territory, humans often fought for abstract concepts like freedom, justice, and the protection of innocent life. Bolt stepped forward next, his multiple arms moving as he gestured toward tactical displays. Human military doctrine operates on principles unknown to other species, he said. Where my people rely on hive coordination and overwhelming numbers, humans emphasize individual initiative and rapid adaptation. He showed footage of human soldiers making split-second decisions in complex situations. Each human warrior is trained to act independently when communication fails. Yet they maintain unit cohesion through shared values and training, rather than biological connection. Bolt's presentation focused on the tactical innovations that humans had developed through centuries of warfare. Humans modify their strategies in real time during combat, he explained. They turn disadvantages into advantages through creative thinking and refuse to accept defeat, even in hopeless situations. Kira moved to the center of the stage for her portion of the presentation. Her analysis focused on the humanitarian aspects of human warfare that had initially confused the team so deeply. Human military forces operate under strict ethical guidelines even during combat, she said. They provide medical care to enemy wounded, protect civilian populations, and follow rules of engagement that often place their own forces at greater risk. She showed footage of human peacekeeping operations, disaster relief efforts, and post-conflict reconstruction. The same military capabilities used in warfare are redirected toward humanitarian goals once conflicts end. Humans view military power as a tool for protecting life, not simply for destroying enemies. Kira's presentation demonstrated how human military units transitioned seamlessly from combat operations to humanitarian missions. They built schools and hospitals in the same regions where they previously fought battles, she explained. Nova approached the display next, their gaseous forms shifting colors as they spoke. Human warfare creates leaders with capabilities that exceed those found in other species, they said. The extreme stress of combat conditions produces individuals capable of making complex decisions. Under pressure while maintaining moral standards, Nova's analysis showed how human military leadership differed from command structures in other civilizations. They developed strategic thinking through experience rather than just theory. Human commanders understand both the practical and psychological aspects of warfare. The presentation continued with Nova explaining how human military training created adaptable leaders who could function in any environment or situation. They prepare for scenarios that other species would consider impossible to survive. Finally, Jake stepped forward for the conclusion. The amphitheater was completely silent as hundreds of alien beings focused on the lone human on stage. My teammates nearly quit the academy after studying human warfare, Jake said, his voice calm and clear. They could not understand how my species survived our own violent nature. But they learned something that every member of the Galactic Defense Force must understand. He gestured toward his 4 teammates. Humans do not fight wars because we love destruction. We fight them because we love what comes after victory: peace, justice, and the protection of innocent life. Jake activated a final display showing human achievements in the years following major conflicts. Every war teaches us to be better protectors, Every battle makes us more effective at defending those who cannot defend themselves. The presentation concluded with footage of human military units working alongside alien forces in recent galactic conflicts. Humans bring unique capabilities to galactic defense, Jake said. Not because we are more violent than other species, but because we have learned to channel our capacity for conflict toward protecting life. As Jake finished speaking, the amphitheater erupted in sustained applause that lasted several minutes. Cadets from dozens of species stood to show their respect, while the faculty members nodded their approval. Commander Vex approached the stage as the applause finally died down. "Team 7, he said in his deep voice, "you have not only completed your assignment successfully, but you have provided valuable insights that will benefit the entire Academy." The commander turned to address the full audience. This presentation demonstrates why humans have become such valuable members of the Galactic Defense Force. They bring perspectives and capabilities that complement the strengths of other species. As Team 7 left the stage, Jake felt a sense of pride in both his species and his teammates. They had faced the darkest aspects of human nature and emerged with a deeper understanding of what made humans valuable allies in the defense of galactic civilization.